So Tom, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to the studio. Much appreciated. It's always good seeing you, my friend.
Same here.
So the thing about it is, you and I have now known each other for about 6 years, and we met around a campfire, of all places, if I remember correctly. Actually, a funny story. I remember it was probably around 11 o'clock at night. We were sitting down, and I just bought some new camping chairs because I didn't have any. And I was coming to this big group camp and all these senior business owner leaders, and I was a little intimidated. And I had these new camping chairs, and they're like rocking chairs. And you and I were sitting there around the campfire. I think we were the last two to survive, and we were having such a good conversation. And the next thing is my rocking chair just flipped backwards, and I kept went rolling down the hill. Incredibly embarrassing, but that's how I got to know you.
And what I remember about that, whatever I was sharing in that moment was like really deep and personal. And then you totally interrupted that. And you didn't roll down the hill. You did a back roll, and then you popped right up. It was very athletic, which was impressive, but it was also a major interruption.
I'm so sorry I interrupted your beautiful, beautiful, deep story.
Yeah, I have no idea what it was. It was just deep. That's all I remember.
Well, what I've come to really appreciate about you is you have had a very storied life from a leadership perspective, business ownership. You're a second generation business owner, now currently chairman of the business. We're going to dig into that a little bit, but you've also left the business and come back into the business. You hear that often with organizations. I mean, Apple with Steve Jobs, that seems to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
I just heard recently Bumble's executive who started is now back again trying to revamp and rethink it. It seems to be a bit of a trend, so we'll dig into that. But I think maybe let's start with something really deep, since we had that conversation around the campfire. And since I've been listening to Simon Sinek a lot, let me ask this: what is your why?
Well, it's a big question. I think it's evolved over the years. My why, as I sit here today, I would say is to encourage and inspire. That's what I think in this stage of life for me is to do that. And I think I'm in a position. The other phrase is I'm a leader who enjoys leading leaders. So I can speak into leadership situations, and I think just given kind of a lifetime of accumulating wisdom, having made a lot of mistakes, I have a lot to share, and I like sharing that with leaders. So if I can encourage and inspire leaders, then I think I'm in my sweet spot.
That's awesome. And how long have you been doing that? Is that something you've been doing all your life, and you've just kind of done more of it recently, or do you feel like it's been a more recent thing?
I would say it's been more recent. I've been a leader for a long time, but I don't think I was as self-reflective that was like my calling. And I've led a company for 40 years, so obviously I've led and influenced people that way. But I think when I retired from kind of active duty, still chairman of the board, it's really this phase of life. What can I do? And so I am a leader. Had a lot of different experiences, but I like to speak into leadership situations. I mean, you're one of those guys, right?
Yeah.
In our convene group, and when I first started in that journey before you joined, I was a leader, but I was a leader who needed to be led.
Yeah.
I was like almost like I felt very alone, sort of at the top, and as I grew, having that accountability and just the benefit of that resource group of people around me, I got to where I was able to speak into situations, and that's probably when I started to realize I actually can do this, say something valuable that's going to help another leader. And so that's more intentional now as I'm not running the company, where I'm enjoying doing that.
So I just recently heard a podcast with Arthur C. Brooks, and he wrote the book Strength to Strength. And one of the things he talks about is fluid intelligence versus crystallized intelligence. Mm-hmm. And it strikes me, based on his definition, there's an age component to this, like up to like 40, 50-ish, you're very fluid intelligent. meaning you're learning, you're growing, you're problem solving, you're very much in the moment trying to figure it out. Then you move into the latter stage of life and you now more crystallized intelligence, which means you can triangulate all of these experiences and see things that most people in fluid intelligence don't see. And he was talking a lot about how people that actually burn out are those that are in the crystallized stage of their lives, but they still try to be in a fluid, intelligent mind. And then they just burn out because they don't have that capacity to do that anymore. And it strikes me with what you're talking about, as you've said, your leader of leaders, if you want, or coach, mentor, has kind of exponentially gotten more so towards the latter part of life. Would you agree that it's got to do with kind of the experiential side of it? Or do you just know more? Do you have more experiences? Or do you just empathize more? Where do you think it lies?
Yeah, I think that fluid knowledge thing, I don't know, for me, I would have said it was partly age, partly getting close to burning out. So we went through some leadership transitions. This is now 6 or 7, 8 years ago. I recognized that as I was in the middle of, business crises, whether it was a sales crises, hard people conversations, those kinds of crises. I just, my energy level wasn't in that. I was able to do it, but I didn't want to. And I remember we had to close down an operation of ours in Phoenix, and it was really hard. And I went down there, flew down there with my son, who's now our chief operating officer. And I spent the week working with him. And he was awesome, like in that whole process. We had a lot of conversations. He had everything planned out, and I didn't want to be there. And I was really aware that I did not want to be there. I think that's the fluid kind of knowledge you're talking about. But if I was in a room like our group of CEOs speaking to those situations, I mean, that did feel energizing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess I'm aware. I wouldn't have called it crystallized knowledge, but I'm aware that that's where, I want to be. And I'm glad for that self-awareness.
And speaking of your son, so COO of HOH is third generation now, right?
He is. Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit, just let's cast your mind back and what you can remember and how the company started. And let's just start there for now.
Well, my dad started it. He started it in '68. So our business is industrial water treatment. He worked for a larger company called Dearborn Chemical Company. Interestingly, people my age know who Dearborn was, and I think my dad was a leader in that company. But as companies get bigger, I mean, Dearborn, somebody even 40 years old has never heard that name, which is interesting. I mean, they're now a part of a much larger conglomerate. So they were sold while he was still there as an executive, and he saw some handwriting on the wall, started his own company. So HOH started in '68. And I think his motivation, honestly, for starting his business was just to basically say, I can do this better than you.
Yeah.
Like, you're making a mistake. He intended to beat Dearborn, basically, which I get, from a competitive point of view. And he was really good at what he did, strong engineer, really good salesman, learned a lot from just kind of watching him. I started with the company in '79. I had worked for a larger air conditioning manufacturer prior to that. But there was always the opportunity to get involved in the family business. And it grew a lot, over the years that I ran it, really. He died in '96. And I had been president since '89. So a lot of growth in the '70s and '80s, and then it just kind of kept ramping up from there.
So he started in '68, you took over in
I started in '79, I became president in '89.
'89, right? And then your son took over COO
That was like 2019 about.
Okay.
It's 30 years, yeah.
So do you think that the goal of the business or the purpose of the business has shifted through the 3 generations?
Yeah. My dad's goal was to kick Dearborn's ass.
Yeah.
Also to make a living. I think my goal was to just run something. I liked my job. It was a corporate marketing position. I saw a career path there. But that wasn't as attractive to me as the opportunity to eventually run my own thing. So I think that was my thing. I think that when it's third generation, a whole different thing. And, we were a lot more established by the time Reed was even aware of what the company was. And so he and then my son-in-law, who's our CEO now, they saw what I had built. They saw flaws. They saw me make mistakes.
Yeah.
And so they had a different vision for what it could be. And so now, they're intentional to say, okay, we exist to make a lasting impact with water. So they're much more visionary, I think. I would be called a visionary, but my vision was just to grow something.
Yeah.
Theirs is to grow for a reason.
Yeah, they have a cause.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast just yesterday, driving back from Aurora. It's a guy who started a consulting firm, and the name of his firm is Better Exits. And so he's consulting with people who are at a point where they need to exit, but so many times they don't have a vision for their organization and what it could look like even after they're gone, or for the rest of their lives. Is kind of the next chapter, which I'm in. But he said that, I forget who it was that quoted, that came up with this. By the time the third generation is involved, there are institutional values that are established. The first generation is just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And again, in my case, it was just to grow something, But now the third generation, and Reed and Andy would say, that the values and the vision they have, it is built on kind of what I built, and what I built was built on what my dad did. Right. But it's interesting, I hadn't thought about that till yesterday. Like the third generation is almost an institution.
Well, and it's also rare for businesses to last that long.
Yeah.
Usually by the time you hit third generation, it's not surviving or dying or about to, right? It very rarely survives 3 generations.
Exactly.
And something I recently heard was, whoever the succession plan is, it's not for them to take your vision further. It's for them to define the next level vision. Mm-hmm. And I think if you get that, and it sounds like, Reed and Stan, that is like, if you get that in place, then you have a whole nother view of taking, you got your own stamp on it if you want.
Yeah.
So you can make it your own, right?
Yeah. So it was probably my vision as we did vision work. This goes back now, 10 or 11 years. To say, okay, what we do, the reason we do what we do is to reward and invest and give back. So we're making a profit to do those 3 things: to reward the employees, to invest in them and in, resources, and also to give back. So just kind of like my generation, I was really interested in the water crisis, safe drinking water crisis. And that started probably, in 2014. I did a mission trip to Indonesia, saw the need. We're in the water business. And so my heart was convicted to do something. And I did. But now what Reed and Andy have done, they've taken it. So I would get 40 people to participate in what they call a 6K run to raise awareness. They've taken that to a level where they engage 1,000 people.
Right.
And where we now invest in one community in Honduras and we take people down there. Whole different level. Yeah. So they kind of took what was mine, but they've really made this their own, which is, very proud of that, obviously. But that's to your point.
Yeah, I love that. Has the financial goals changed along with the I guess the more vision, purpose-oriented goals?
Yes. They came in both of them came in at a time when we had just made a large acquisition. And it was a really difficult integration. And so we took on more debt than I should have, I think, to make that deal. And then the integration went poorly. So we were highly leveraged and the business wasn't growing like it needed to. Right. The value of making that move was it really revealed a lot of organizational challenge that we had. So, we were still a small company, but we were big in numbers. We were operating like a small company, I should say. And that debt was, a big deal. And we weren't operating well. Made a lot of organizational changes. Again, our CEO group was super helpful in helping me do that. But now, for example, debt is a big deal to them. They don't want any. It's a good lesson learned, right? And I totally relate to that. If they look at an acquisition now and, we talk about it, I'm always inclined to do the deal. and I'll take on debt to do it. I'm kind of wired that way.
Yeah.
They are not. It's a really healthy tension. I can say, look, I mean, you don't want to take on too much. And this one deal I definitely did. But it's okay if it's the right deal, you know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they've seen. Well, I would say this. I think especially my son, at some level, I was kind of like a hero for him. So he starts for the business. He's working for his dad. His dad's a big deal, whatever. Then he sees me making a lot of mistakes, and he knows they're mistakes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like we didn't argue about those. There was a growing curve for him. And so he kind of went from seeing me as a hero as just to a guy who, you know, is human, who's successful in a lot of areas and needed to grow in a lot of others. And so they both watched me do that. And it's been really good. It's been, I think, I don't say humbling. I'm grateful that they, you know, that they see me for who I am, not like some kind of idol, right?
That's right. It's not what you do anymore. It's like who you are.
Yeah.
Right. You're talking about a really interesting dynamic because in the world we live in, when we're trying to help organizations increase their performance, especially those that are running large ERPs like SAP, and you have a hired executive team, then it tends to be very clinical in what they're looking for, right? They have a certain goals around, hey, we got to achieve a certain revenue, see an EBITDA, whatever the goals are, because the shareholders are expecting that. I'm listening to you talk, and there seems to be like this whole nother dynamic from a business ownership point of view that is a family business. Yeah, the metrics and the finances need to be there, but my son's looking up at me, or my son's learning from these. Like there's like a whole nother dynamic as a privately held business that's trying to grow, and what you're bringing to the table from a dynamic perspective. How much of that does that play into your decision making when you're considering larger investments or things like that? How much of it do you think about, hey, how does this impact my family versus how much is it going to impact the business?
I mean, I don't think about how it impacts my family. You know, it doesn't impact me at this point, and I'm confident Reed and Andy know what they're doing. So the how it impacts our, you know, family, not so much. But I do think I think my dad was kind of the same way. I was probably better than him at making long-term decisions, like with the long-term in view. And Reed and Andy are definitely that way. I mean, they're, you know, Reed's 35, Andy's 42. So, you know, they're running a significant enterprise, but they have a long time to run it. And so, you know, they're visionary. And so they look at the long view. And so I think the best run family businesses, or private businesses, I should say, really are able to take a long view. And honestly, then they aren't constrained by the pressure to deliver a quarterly, you know, return on the stockholders' investment.
Right.
There's a freedom there that, you know, is a big advantage.
Right. I love that, because it is still financially needs to be a viable business. It needs to be able to grow, scale, multiply. But yet there is in the back of your mind a thought process as it relates to your kids, your family. And it may not necessarily be the reason you're making decisions, but it definitely plays a part of your conversation.
Yeah, I think one thing they have done since I left is to be, there's a kind of a program out there called Open Book Management. And Reed and Andy have bought into that, and they've worked really hard to communicate our finances in a way they do it really well. I think I always tried to be open and honest, but I mean, they're saying, okay, this is how much, you know, EBITDA we made this quarter. These are our targets. And if we hit these targets, then this is what your bonus is going to be. So every employee knows at the beginning of the year what our target's going to be, and they're going to know if they hit it, then this is going to be the size of their bonus. And it's not just the bonus. That does motivate people, though. It's very, very, and it's clear, right? So being clear is super helpful. But they also see us invest a lot in, let's say, Honduras with what we're doing with safe drinking water there. And then they're able to make the connection, not just our family, but the employees, the company family, if you will. They're able to say, okay, if we hit these EBITDA targets, we're also going to be helping, you know, this community get safe drinking water.
Yeah.
And they feel a sense of ownership with that. Maybe that's a good way to say it. It's not easy to get, even in a private company, as you get bigger, to get the employees to feel ownership. But in our case, they've done a great job leading, and that's cool to watch.
I don't think it's very common, though, for privately held firms to open up the books to that level. I think they open it up to certain levels, but they don't know if they go all the way.
Right.
And again, it also depends very much on the philosophy, I guess. But there's more likely it's got to do with, hey, I can take you to a certain level of knowledge, and then thereafter, it's. And they treat it a little bit more like a bank account as opposed to a business, almost. Right? I don't want you to see what I spend my money on.
Right.
Which leads into a lot of the conversations when we had, because even if you think of the world that we live in, we're talking about organizations that are, 500 million or in the billions, like 500 million and up kind of thing, right? For them to be able to run these big softwares like SAP, you've got to have the resources to do that. And yet, even in those companies, there are constraints around who sees what and where and how. And I think that plays a big impact on companies, people making good decisions, because if they don't know how it impacts the bottom line or doesn't know how it impacts their cash flow or these different metrics that really matter, it becomes hard for them to make a decision. When you were running your business, were you that transparent, or did it become more transparent over time?
I would say I was that transparent. I just don't think my strategy, my system for communicating information was as clear. I think there was always a sense of ownership. There was a sense that they trusted me and kind of my vision. But looking back, I would say it was fuzzier.
Yeah.
It's hard to communicate clearly.
Yeah.
You can think you're communicating clearly, and you find out you haven't.
That's right.
And they are both, they're maniacal about clear communication.
Yeah.
And it just takes effort. And this is 2025. It's taken, I would say, they probably have been doing the open book management for like 4 years. And it was less clear 4 years ago than it is now, right? It's just something you got to kind of commit to. It's a process. And I would think that the larger the organization, the more important it is to communicate the why of what we're doing.
Oh, for sure. Which I love why yours was so clear, your personal one. And then now HOH's is so clear about how you want to give back to the community.
That helps a lot.
Yeah. Is there a particular lesson or philosophy or value that your dad had that passed on to you that meant everything to you, and that you've been able to pass that on to your son and your son-in-law in terms of running the business?
Good question. I mean, in terms of character, the one thing that he said this multiple times, that he always valued was loyalty. I think that's and I think that's been a trademark of our company, where people are loyal to, let's say, me as the owner, but they've also sensed that I'm loyal to them. And so I think that was probably the most important thing to my dad. He was loyal to his people. I mean, his employees loved him. And I think they would probably say the same thing about me. He was also just technically excellent at what he did. And he was a natural leader too. So his presence in the room was always really huge. You knew who he was. He couldn't help that. So he was a leader, but he was also just technically really good. So we're really good at what we do.
Yeah. Like if you had to pick one or two metrics, what was the most important to you from a business? Metrics like EBITDA, cash flow, inventory, revenue. Like they often talk about revenue as the ego speaking, and profitability is what really counts. But
yeah, and revenue was definitely my ego speaking.
Yeah.
And I just kind of assumed, that the profit would follow, and it did most years. Did I maximize profit like I should have? No, I was honestly more interested in growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that was fun.
Right.
I liked being in big selling situations, closing big deals.
So if somebody came to you and said, "Hey, if you spend $10 here, you're going to get 100 fold that in revenue," versus I spend $10, I'm going to get 100-fold in profit, Which one would be the one that drives you the most?
I think I would have picked revenue. I'm not proud of that, but that's probably what I would have done. So
and what would your boys do right now?
They would pick the profit all day long.
Okay.
So they're what I've watched them do. A big thing for us is cash conversion cycle, which I honestly never paid any attention to. But it's really helped us, find sort of, the leaks in what's draining cash. So inventory turns are a big part of that, obviously, receivable days, payable days. And amazingly, because that's a complicated concept, cash conversion cycle.
Yeah.
The employees kind of get it because we're talking about it all the time. And they know if they do a good job on collections, for example, that moves the needle, right? It lowers the number of days. And it becomes a bit of a game. I think Reed's done a good job of doing that. But it's all they might even say cash is more important than profit, like piling up cash.
But, okay, I love where you're going with this. So explain that just maybe for the audience. What is a cash conversion cycle, like in layman terms?
It's really the amount of days of cash that is outstanding.
Okay.
So the lower the number, so like receivables, if your customers are paying you in 90 days, that's going to affect the cash conversion cycle negatively. If you get that down to 30 days, obviously big impact. If you can stretch your vendors from 30 to 45 days, for example. And then inventory turns too, like how much cash is sitting in inventory.
Right.
And so there's a calculation, and it is a number of days. And so the lower the number of days that your cash is tied up, the better your cash flow is going to be.
How does the guy on the shop floor associate with that metric?
Well, it depends on their job description. So if they're on the shop floor, they're aware of inventory.
Okay. Right.
And so
throughput as well, right? Because they're managing the speed at which they can manufacture things.
Yeah.
So that's a revenue enablement. Hopefully improves cash cycle.
Yeah. And I think for us, our manufacturing process is really simple. It's really just blending. It's a big vat. It's like Citgo kind of. It's similar to that in terms of their oil products they were making. But so if you're in production, you're aware of how much inventory am I using. How fast, but especially how much we have on hand. For us, we don't want to have any more on hand than we need. So just in time kind of, inventory management, that's helped a lot. So they win with that. If our receivables people are saying, hey, if I can get this customer who's notoriously slow paying and move them down, then they know they win. If you're paying attention to how you're paying your bills instead of just, rotely paying them when they come in, that helps too. So it kind of depends on the job description. What's fun is everybody knows they're winning because we publish the cash conversion cycle number like monthly. And and if it moves a day, I think what they do, if it moves down a day, then the whole company gets a $500 bonus.
Oh, like instantly?
Yeah.
Wow. So
they've done a good job of making that fun, and again, getting buy-in.
The immediate feedback, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We often refer to a statistic that we've been tracking for like last 20 years, and it's been true. It's varied over the years, but for the most part, it's true. And we talk about 94% of companies are underutilizing their SAP system, and that translates to 9 out of 10 companies are leaking profit that have implemented it because they don't know what they don't know, and they don't necessarily use it the right way of their customer, whatever the reason is, right? If I had to use the word profit leakage to you, like what does that mean for you in HOH? Like how would you translate that into tangible components?
Yeah, well, it would be a negative term, number one.
Yeah.
And if our employees heard the term profit leakage, they would immediately connect that to the fact that their bonus is going to be less.
Right.
And so I think profit leakage, now we're not talking about depreciation as much, at least in our business. But outside of that, I mean, it's cash, right? Cash is profit less depreciation, amortization, et cetera. And so profit leakage to us would mean that there's things we can do to stop that leak. So we can manage our inventory better. We can get, collect our receivables, whatever it would be. So that's what that would mean.
Yeah, in many ways, the image I always have is a boat, and the water's leaking in, through the little holes and stuff. And often it's the little things, right, that cause it. Turnaround time on machine equipment when you're trying to manufacture something. How much, is the cleanup stage or the turnaround time, the buffering, how much inventory we keep along the way, how much extra time we put into the process to give ourselves a buffer. All of those little things are leakages, right? They're $100 bills that we keep stepping over because it's just giving us a comfort level. We're not necessarily pushing ourselves. And a large part of it's got to do with systems, right? Because the way you run your systems and the way ABC company runs the systems are very different. It could be the same system, but you run it differently because you understand it differently. As you think about the scalability of your business, how much does systems play a role for you in that?
I would say a big role. And I think a lot of our transition from, I guess I'll say owner operated, which even though we had a leadership team, it still felt like I was kind of leading, to where we're more decentralized. We're really doing a much better job at empowering and delegating legitimate authority. Those systems come into play a ton. Yeah. So we spent a lot of the 2010 decade putting in a system we call EOS.
Yep.
And that's helped us a ton. And we operate according to that system.
And that's very much more of a framework than necessarily a technological system.
Yeah.
Right. That's not
right.
It's not necessarily an application. It's more, hey, this is a framework. Here's how we're going to have our meetings. Here's how we're going to structure our stuff. So you need both. You need the framework and the IT system if you want.
Yeah. And the IT part of that is to, have a system that works that helps you find the leaks.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's such an important point, though, because most people use a system to do the work or do the transaction. Like, I got to capture it. I got to record what I've done. You've just called out something really important. The system is supposed to help us identify the leaks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my word, that's money right there, because most people don't see it that way. They absolutely see it as it's something I got to do to keep track of what I'm doing or to move the needle along. But it's not because it's my continuous improvement capability. That's massive. I mean, the fact that you see that I think it's rare for leaders to see that.
I'm thinking this is going to sound technical when you talk about leaks. So our business is water treatment. And I remember early in my career, I was in a boiler plant and they have their pumps. They're called feed water pumps. They pump the feed water to the boiler and it turns into steam. And these feed water pumps were leaking water. And so you could see the pump. They were really old. There was oil involved. It was kind of contaminated too, but you saw steam just misting off of these pumps. I mean, that was a big leak.
Yeah.
They didn't know any better. Like, this is just how they did it. And the water treatment company, i.e. the consultant, like Reveal would be with SAP.
Yeah.
Well, they were making a lot of money because the more water they used and the more energy they consumed, the more chemical they had to buy. So that was like a fun problem and it took a while. I would say from the time, it was very obvious. The amount of money it was costing this hospital was a lot. It still took me a year to say, like, what are you guys doing?
And they just didn't know it was happening?
They knew it was happening.
They just didn't know what to do about it.
They didn't know what to do about it.
That's amazing.
And they just accepted it.
And that's the other thing I'm loving this conversation because that's the other thing. We often talk about the 7 most expensive words in business. We've always done it that way. And that's true, right? I mean, the hospital is a great example. Mm-hmm. We know there's a problem. We've tried to fix it. We can't. So that's now just part of our process. That's just who we are. How restrictive and how damaging is that to a business, having that mindset?
Well, it just stunts your ability to grow and be who you desire to be. And every organization has that.
I mean, everybody does. You're right.
So when we implemented this kind of operating system, not the IT part, but just like how we go about our business, there were, generally people have been there a while saying, we've always done it this way. Mm-hmm. I was never in that camp, ever. But I had a lot of employees who were. Mm-hmm. And it just slows down progress.
Yeah.
And then you have the people who really want to grow and improve, and they're going to get frustrated because there's a culture that says this is how we've always done it. I think when you're talking about the large organizations that you work with, again, they're used to doing it a certain way, No one's really told them to do anything differently, and no one's painted a vision to say this. If you do it this way, if you stop this leak, this is what the result's going to be. You don't get that from leadership probably, and if you do get it, then then you see some progress.
The leaders who see it move quickly because they're like, oh my word, that's amazing. I can actually, with clarity now, see the problem and see the vision. But there are so many that don't, and that's why I was asking the dynamic between ownership versus hired management, because sometimes it is just about how do I keep the ship moving at a certain pace to get my bonus at the end of the day, versus like, are there things I can do to really move the needle? And that's a mind shift for many, or is it? Or is it a limiting belief, or what do you think it is?
I think it's about just not understanding what the big picture is.
Yeah. I can't see it.
Yeah. I think in the case of large corporations, I'm thinking of food processing, like we have a lot of food processing customers.
Right.
The pressure on the rank and file management to just produce meat is, I've never seen pressure like those guys are under day in and day out. So the leaks in those systems are ridiculous. From a water treatment point of view, there's so much waste going on. But there's so little attention given to like those leaks because it's all about how many heads of cattle or pork they processed. That's really frustrating for us.
And they're making money in spite of themselves, right? Despite themselves, I guess.
That's right. It'd be better, and everybody would be happier if they, and gosh, a lot of people, there are people who are our customers who are frustrated by leaks, just inefficient processes. In our case, just, water treatment problems that they're eating up assets. They just feel like no one cares.
Yeah.
There is that. So I think it's a lot of that. The bigger the organization, the more it's just like business as usual.
Right. Yeah, there's a really famous story, and there's different iterations of this, but a machine breaks down, nobody can fix it. It's causing them millions and millions of dollars, and they call a mechanic to come out. He spends 10 minutes looking at the machine from different angles and pulls out a hammer and hits, a nut somewhere 3 times gently just to move it slightly, and everything works again. And then basically gives him a bill for $10,000, and the CEO supposedly loses it because like, hey, it only took you 10 minutes. He says, well, yeah, so it took me 10 minutes, so therefore it cost you $50. The other $9,950 was the know-how and experience that it took me to know which button to hit, right? How often do you think that becomes a constraint for companies because they get caught up in cost versus value?
All the time.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, it's such a short-term mindset in many organizations. It is the bottom line. It is not the bottom line, it's the stock price. Mm-hmm. It's the return on the investment. So it happens a lot. There's no doubt. And I'll keep coming back to it. It's a leadership issue.
It is a leadership issue. How does that change? So you talk about short term. Now, as a business owner, that generational business owner, there's a legacy component to that. Mm-hmm. But there's a longer term thinking. I think again of Simon Sinek's talk about the infinite game, right? There's an abundance out there. It's an infinite game. Life goes on even if you're not around. Like, so are you playing the infinite game or are you playing the finite game? How do you see it from the lens that you live as a generational owner?
Yeah, we read that book, and the infinite game language is something that I connect with, but definitely my son and son-in-law connect with that as well. And infinite, nothing's infinite, right? But it's definitely long-term, and it gives you that perspective. And so then long-term speaks to, a sustainable return on investment that is necessary to do all the things you want to do. You need to reward an investor for their investment. In our case, we want to invest, reward, and give back. So running a profitable business is crucial. Like needing to maximize that on a quarterly basis is just not. That's just not in our mindset. We don't have to do that because we're taking a longer view, a more infinite view. The other thing I remember from that book is the distinction between a competitor and a worthy adversary.
Yes.
We want to be a worthy adversary. We don't want to be the cheapest. We want to be someone who our competitors want to emulate. And then that speaks to then who we are, our vision and values. And those companies are out there, both big and small. And I think that's what's hopeful. So you have, the increasing pressure day to day. I'm sure you see this on short-term profit and return.
All the time.
All the time. But it's not always like that. It's not always like that. There's a book I read recently called, I can't remember the title. A Different Way is the title. It's about a guy who was a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, private equity guy. And the mantra in the 80s and 90s that took over in Silicon Valley was get big fast.
Yeah.
Didn't even matter if you're making a profit, right? Just get big fast. And he became disillusioned with that, and he began to look for companies who did things differently. And, to his amazement, he found a lot of them, both small and some really large enterprises. So he started an organization called the Tugboat Institute. And it's an investment vehicle, but the tugboat is the ones who are going to bring the big ships, into the right path, for their journey. And I like that a lot. And what he's encouraged by is they're out there, but again, it starts at the top. It is a cultural thing and it's a legacy thing. And if you're just blessed enough to have, multiple generations who kind of get that picture, a lot of good things can happen.
So not many people may know this part of the story, but it is, at some point in your life, you decided that running a business is not really in your future and that you were going to go and take a detour. Let me stop there and you share the story around moving into the seminary.
Yeah, it was just a weird, I think, kind of God conversation that came out of nowhere. But I would say that as I was reflecting and then sort of felt God calling me to do a certain thing, it was in response to feeling bored at work. Like I can remember a sense of boredom. Well, we were doing well, but I was just kind of sick of, I think I am wired to be more visionary and less administrative. I can do the administrative stuff, but I don't think it ever was energizing for me. And so I was probably in a period of just like, what's the next big thing? So, at age 50, I decided to go to seminary. I didn't give up owning the company, but I did step back a lot from the day-to-day management. One of the good parts there, as far as HOH was concerned, was it really allowed me to kind of empower a leadership team for the first time. I think that was good. But then I spent, 5 years in seminary, and then another probably 9 years on staff at a church. I was still present at HOH, but I was a lot less present. And I was trying to delegate more, which was a good thing to try anyways. But yeah, that was life-changing in terms of what I learned. I remember I was on staff at the church. For a long time, I was an intern. So I was like Robert De Niro. I was like the oldest intern ever. And they gave me this title of pastor of Compassion Ministries, which was really good for me. I learned a lot about stuff, the needs of people who were, just disadvantaged. Was really, really good. Recovery stuff. But when people at work heard that I had the title of Pastor of Compassion Ministries, they thought that was pretty funny.
Well, knowing you, it's funny.
I know.
But then now, when you get to really know you, you actually recognize that is part of your DNA. It doesn't come out necessarily on the surface, but it's definitely in your heart.
Yeah, and it did, from a leadership point of view, it helped me be a better leader.
Well, now I was going to go with that. So obviously, the leadership team at the time didn't do too well, and it's a little bit of a Steve Jobs story where you kind of had to step back in and take over and make some changes. How much of that, compassion component, let's just say that period away, what did you learn that you brought to the table the second time round, and what did you do differently because of it?
From my seminary experience?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or just those 14 years of actually being out there, caring for others.
I learned how to listen better. I I might have had a compassionate bent that people don't necessarily see, but I learned what it looked like to kind of, like really get involved in someone's life in a way that I really never knew before that. So it made me more sensitive to struggles that, say, people were having at work.
Mm-hmm.
That was a positive. The negative was sometimes I got enmeshed in their issues, and I acted like a pastor more than like a boss.
Right.
And that was actually a big negative. I think in that regard, then I still hadn't quite learned from a leadership point of view the importance of holding people accountable. And sometimes I would default to say, well, I can really help this person solve their crisis, when it wasn't my place to do that. It fueled our interest in safe drinking water. I mean, that came out of a mission trip when I was on staff at the church. It's given me a platform in a number of cases, because most people know in our industry, they know that I'm a person of faith. So I get to speak, and in effect share the gospel. It was really good for me personally.
Yeah.
Really good.
And that's obviously been able to spill over to your boys, and they've been able to take that forward, right?
Yeah.
At least philosophically, the same compassion and empathy and caring for others.
Yeah, I think that, I'm going to seminary. We still, like, Reed was still at home. His older sister was still at home. We had 5 kids, but 2 were still at home. But they're watching me get up, at 4 a.m. to study and, kind of juggle. We had people living with us, mainly just because of ministry stuff. My example, honestly, I didn't intend it to be that way, but, he's watching me pray every morning at 4:30. That example was huge. I didn't know that would be a benefit, but it really was. And I think then that probably speaks to, I guess it's worth pointing out, your example is everything, right? And you don't even know.
Yeah.
So whatever the leadership role, like how you are treating people and what you're committed to and what's important to you, especially if you're in a leadership role like I was, everybody pays attention to that. Everybody does. So yeah, it was life-changing. It was good for the company for a lot of those years. I mean, we grew while I was, kind of there part-time. We bought, I think, 2 companies during that time. But it was also a good witness to the employees, I think. Whether they're persons of faith or not, they knew I was legit.
Right.
I think that helped.
Do you have a question for me?
I'm interested in what you see the future of your industry being, obviously on your board. The standard consultant model, which you guys seem to excel at from my point of view, and the development of technology. I'm thinking of Reveal TV, but also maybe AI in general. How you see that morphing and how you really provide the best solutions for your customers. It seems to me that's going to be an important transition.
Yeah, I mean, we're at a really cusp of what this means to the consulting industry. The consulting industry has been commoditized over the years anyway, because knowledge has just become so easy to find, just back in the Google days, right? Now everybody uses ChatGPT as a Google search, right? So I think it's commoditizing for sure. And companies that are going to continue to just provide commodity-based advice will be gone within just a handful of years. I think where we lean heavily on, and I think this is what's helped us even in the last 20 years, which I think will continue, are 2 main components. I think the first is we're about outcomes, not about the advice. And that makes a big difference, because the advice might change, the where we get the advice might change based on experience or knowledge or whatever. But at the end of the day, what we're recommending to do is all based on an outcome, and we're held accountable to the outcome. And I think that's going to be key, because AI is not going to take away the outcome. It may help streamline a whole bunch of things in between, but it's not going to change the outcome. As long as we stay focused on that, I think we have from a Reveal perspective, revealing the hidden value in your business, using your systems, is going to continue to be a valuable, tangible component of the advisory/consulting business. The other part about it is the people. Honestly, we fundamentally believe our cornerstone to our business is about caring for others. And so if we're building technology to replace people, then I think we're in the wrong business, and I'm happy to check out at that point. But getting technology to support people, to make things better for them, to elevate their life work balance, if you want, and giving them the freedom to really do the value-add work, the smart work, which, if you think about the words I'm using, is no different than what they said 25 years ago when the internet came and everybody was like, oh my word, what's going to happen? And 25 years before that, when the steel industry was saying, what are we going to do? They moved all the steel away. Like, there's these big, generational changes that are happening, and AI is just a big part of it. And it's a fast moving one, and it's going to have an impact, and it will affect all of us. But I think if we come back to some of the core principles, and you kind of alluded to it in the way you think about life too, is you put people at the forefront of everything. They're the cornerstone. It's about how you make them better, and then producing the outcomes for the business. You can combine those two things. I think there's many more years to come.
Yeah, I think the principle I'm thinking of, I can't think of the book, but From Good to Great, maybe.
Yeah.
It's where the author's talking about, like, the core values are what are core to you, whether it's 1950 or 2050, and so things change. So having a desktop computer isn't a core value. Like, you might need it today, but things are changing, right?
That's right.
I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
100%. And when we started the business, we had 10 principles, very sound principles that are very scripturally based, very focused on the human, yourself and the one you're engaging with.
Yeah.
And as you said, as long as you focus on that, it's going to be hard to commoditize that component. I mean, people are still, we've been talking a lot about Simon Sinek a lot in this session, but he's a big proponent of the idea that AI will help you build the boat, it'll even help you sail the boat, it'll even tell you how to deal with the storms when it comes, but it's not going to teach you to swim when the storm hits. And so there are still pieces that are going to be human related, and there are going to be pieces that the human connection is required. We already live in a disconnected world, an incredibly connected world, but very disconnected, human world.
Yeah.
And that's all we crave is connection. I mean, there's the statistic now on loneliness is higher than ever before, yet we're the most connected we've ever been before. So I think it's just going to continue that. And then for that reason, we as humans are going to be even more important to be able to keep the rest of humanity kind of moving in the right direction. So I think, and also because of our purpose is to be an economic engine for good. And you talked about good, you got your definition, ours is about being healthy, generous, and multiplying. Like, what does that look like? And as long as you focus on those things, the rest will come.
Yeah, I get that. And I think that's a big picture, and it's awesome. We're similar in that I view what we do as a service business. So, for example, there's a ton of technology that allows a water treatment system to operate without a service representative or a consultant coming in to check on their water. And we see when a company relies on that 100% without any qualified expert like our people to go in, they never work. The technology is amazing, and it can help somebody do their job. But that person is still a service. It is still a relation. It always will be. I think over time, maybe the qualifications for the people will evolve. They're going to have to be more technologically competent. I don't know. At least in our industry, there's no doubt about that. But you can't totally automate something that involves a relationship to help somebody get better.
I agree, 100%. Okay, so as we wrap, I've got two questions for you. Basically, one two-part question. What's the biggest challenge you faced in the past, and how did you overcome it? And what do you think is the biggest challenge you have going into the future, and how are you going to handle that?
Biggest challenge? I mean, personally or professionally?
Your choice. Dealer's choice.
Biggest challenge, I'll say professionally, was transitioning my leadership team to a team that would take the business to the next generation.
Okay.
That was hard. My biggest challenge now going forward, probably learning to ask good questions.
Well, that's good full circle, right? As you started, what's your why? And it's all about leading others.
Yeah.
That's a great way to tie it back together. Love it. Hey, Tom, thank you very much, man.
Yep.
This is always a pleasure hanging out with you.
Absolutely.
So much fun.
Thank you.